What makes a premium lake in the Hayward area? Not all lakes in Hayward are created equal. As a matter of fact, not all lakes are created equal, period. And understanding what makes a lake premium can have a major impact on your property's value. In the Northwoods, the lake itself often is the biggest driver, not the home for its value. Factor one is water quality. We're going to talk about the clarity, the depth, the clean water, and the swimmability. Clarity. Some lakes are dark lakes, some lakes are clear lakes, and these are things to consider when we're talking about water quality. The other one is the depth. Some of these lakes are very shallow. They don't have a whole lot of depth, and when you get a water that has deeper 10, 15 feet versus 2-foot pond, things like that. So depth is another factor for water quality. Clean water. We talked about clarity, but then there's also just clean water. Swimmability. How easy is it for you to swim in? So these are some of the water quality factors to take in line. Clear, deep water is one of the biggest indicators of a premium lake. Factor number 2 is recreational quality. We have fishing quality. We're talking muskie, walleye, bass. Some people love crappie. The boating, can you water ski? Can you jet ski? Can you, use a power boat? Or do you have to have a trolling motor only? Or is it, no motors at all? Wake zones, lake size, and multi-use versus limited use. The more the lake supports different types of recreation, the more demand it usually has. Factor number 3, shoreline character. Sand versus muck, gradual entry, or usable frontage. These are all things to talk about. So is it sandy? Is it comfortable under the feet? Or is it a mucky, water's edge around the whole lake? Is there gradual entries? Or do you have to drop off from a zip line to get into the lake? You'll know. And there's some of these houses that are just perched up. The lake is a straight drop down. The glacier's cleared it out a certain way. Or does it have a nice gradual entry? Usable shoreline is a big part of what buyers are buying and willing to pay top dollar for. Factor 4, privacy and development level. Spacing between homes, natural feel, overdeveloped versus balanced. So some lakes you're going to see, you might be able to see it when you're looking online, but the homes are stacked right on top of each other. Some of the other prime lakes, they'll have space, so you don't feel claustrophobic. So we're talking about these premium lakes in the Hayward area and what makes it feel premium. Some of the premium lakes, I will tell you, for my taste, feel a little tight, in quarters, but they're still, the multi-use and the availability to the water and the clarity can override some of that as well. But spacing between homes is one of them. A natural feel, not overly developed. There's a balance, when we talked about overdeveloped versus balance, a lake that the homes kind of have these nice meandering driveways and just has a little bit of room for everybody to have a family and fun and a little space. Lakes that feel less crowded and more natural tend to have the ability to command a higher price for the long-term value. Factor 5, location and access. We're talking about proximity to Hayward. Is it 5 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? Running 40 minutes to get a quick bag of groceries for your, summer trip and, maybe the weekend only can be, feel like you're eating up a lot of road time. So the proximity to Hayward, the ease of access, road conditions, and year-round usability all, are, things to be discussed for premium, lakes in the Hayward area. So convenience matters more than people think. So especially for a second home, we talked about this, especially for the second home buyer. When people are coming up here on the weekend and have to drive 40 minutes because somebody forgot the milk, they're rock, paper, scissors for who's getting in the car, driving to town to get it. If you're 10, 15 minutes late, such as Round Lake or some of the other ones, that is something to keep in mind. So factor number 6, let me scroll up here. Factor number 6 is long-term demand, the reputation of the lake, the historical demand, and the name recognition. We all know there's some names that everybody can recognize just right off the bat. So Certain lakes have certain reputations, and that will, share its ability, and the reputation could be anything. It could be clarity of the water, or the long-term history of muskie fishermen, or just the history of Hayward, back in the 50s, 60s, when this was, the beginning of the lodge renaissance, I call it out here. So you have that giving you that premium lake. Some lakes simply carry longer term demand, and that affects value over time. When you combine all of these factors, that's what determines these lakes, whether they're a premium or to be considered a premium, and that's what buyers are willing to pay more for. Understanding where your property sits within this spectrum is the key to pricing and positioning correctly. Understanding where your property sits within the spectrum is key to pricing and positioning it correctly. If you're thinking about selling your lakefront property and you want to kind of have a clear understanding of where your property sits within that premium value, feel free to reach out. You can text me, call me. I'll be happy to walk you through it.